Hey, Roger Martin here from Billings, Montana. Some of this stuff from David Wilcocks and some of these other insiders, it's just so hard to believe it. It's a little clip of telling you what Germany did and what was going on for a couple of minutes here.
Horrible thing, but they ended up going into the war anyway. Then you have World War II, where right after the U.S. joins World War II, we have this infamous Battle of Los Angeles, in which a whole fleet of ships flew over L.A. Lots of people saw it. Thousands of very large munitions were fired at these ships, and some people even died of heart attacks, and the ships were unharmed. So it's very clear, you know, these cover-ups occur. Roswell occurs a few years later, 1947. The whole thing's covered up. A lot of speakers here are going to be going through the history of that. We have meticulous data. And at that time, the military-industrial complex got their hands on extraterrestrial technology. Technology that works, technology that can fly around. But they were not anywhere near as successful as the Germans had been, because the Germans cut a deal with the same Draco reptilians that were working with Henry VIII and Queen Elizabeth and protected them from the invasion by the Spanish Armada. So this group is real. There are actual extraterrestrial reptilians, or saurians as they're also called. It's very important to understand this. I do not suggest that they are shape-shifting biological beings that look like us. That is a misnomer. David Icke and I have talked about this through kind of a secondhand source. And what I've said is, if you think that you're seeing somebody shape-shift, you're probably just seeing a telepathic overlay of the face of these beings that they're in contact with telepathically. And a sensitive person might see that flicker over their face. It's happened to me. I have seen that. It was really, really shocking. When I met a high-level Illuminati insider and he was shaking my hand, he gave me this devilish grin. His face popped into this thing. And it was very frightening. And even though I was in public in front of other people, I actually just took this step back. And he goes, "How did you like that?" I did not. Okay. Now it's funny, but it's true. This stuff really is happening. So the Germans, and I have multiple insiders that have talked about this, the Germans, as they're progressing with their secret space program, starting with dirigibles, the Draco basically come in and say, you guys really need some help. You're not getting it here. Hot air balloons are not going to cut it. Let's give you something real. So they brought in this guy, Victor Schauberger, who had discovered a UFO type of technology. Yeah, there you go. They brought in Tesla's technology, and they came up with a mercury-based turbine that they had in the late 1930s, and they were perfecting it, called the Bell, and it was also called Kronos because it would actually change the flow of time when you fire it up. They had a meeting, and I was told this was in like 1939 in the Himalayas with the Draco. First time the Nazis got to meet the Draco in person. And almost immediately, the Draco gave them all kinds of technology to be able to go out into the universe. So
Now, this is in 1939, 1940 Himalayas. These reptilian-type Draco aliens working their deals with Germany. And they had Antarctica, and they had some stations on the moon and stations on Mars. They are 10 years ahead of us. So literally, they're making a deal with Draco aliens, and you can call them what they want, but they have better technology and better understanding of what's going on than we did, for sure.
as early as 1939, 1940, you have Nazis traveling around our solar system, discovering there's a lot of extraterrestrials, there's a lot of ancient ruins, and they were given protected space on the moon and Mars to inhabit and to build their own bases in conjunction with the Draco. In the meantime, the U.S. is way the heck behind. They only got Roswell in 1940.
In the conjunction with the Draco aliens. This is just unreal, this stuff. And Berg got his butt kicked in Antarctica, so they had Antarctica. And he also talked about Hitler dying in the later 60s and moved down to Antarctica, and they had all this stuff. You'll hear this in a moment.
47. By that point, the Germans already almost had 10 years of working on this stuff. And then, as we were talking about in the panel the other day, in 1952, there was an overflight of ships over the U.S. Capitol building. And so literally, people on the ground were seeing a fleet of UFOs flying over the Capitol. It caused a big uproar. There's lots of stuff you can research about this. And we've now heard from multiple insider sources that was the German Armada. They didn't really lose World War II because they still had Antarctica and they still had their technology. They allowed Germany to fall because they couldn't control that part of the war, and they didn't want to reveal their hand. They knew the bigger battle was in space. So they allowed Germany to fall. Hitler was squirreled away to Argentina, where he lived out his life until the 1960s, as it turns out. And there was an interesting show called Hunting Hitler that was from the Alliance, talking about that. And then once I exposed that that show was an Alliance show, all of a sudden it got canceled, which was really annoying. Because they were taking you to places that had all the Nazi insignias, Nazi swastika swimming pool, all kinds of crazy stuff. All in South America. So most definitely, the German initiative continued, and they made an offer that the U.S. couldn't refuse in 1952. They forced them to join this secret space program. So the U.S. military-industrial complex had already been penetrated by Project Paperclip, which was Nazi scientists that came over, allegedly not Nazis, and there were supposedly rules that you couldn't be a Nazi. That wasn't true. They were bringing in all these scientists by U-boats and dropping them off, and nobody even knew what was going on. So they basically just transferred their operations to the United States. It's very important. Also important is to understand that the Germans and the British were not in competition. They were both the same family. Hitler was the illegitimate son of British royalty, believe it or not. And you can look that up. I've done a lot of research on that, showing how Hitler's face is exactly like the face of King George. They're all part of the same family. So they took a British royal and they dropped him off in Germany, and then they create this apparent villain. So this is what I've been saying all along. What these guys do is they own both sides of the war, and their real goal is to try to reduce population and gain control of the planet. So Hitler was British. The Germans and the British were the same. That's why when you do the research, you find out that American corporations were building Hitler's Wehrmacht. Ford Motor Company, I had a college class on this in 1993. Ford, and I would be scored on whether I was right based on answering this question. Ford Motor Company built Hitler's tanks with tank plants in Germany, and when the Allied bombers blew up the Ford tank plants, Ford personally repaid Hitler to rebuild them as fast as possible. I had another class that started the same year, and in that class, my professor said that Boeing had built Hitler's bombers in America, starting them out as commercial airliners. Then they were shipped to South America, where they took the seats out. Then they were shipped over to Africa, where they were repainted as Hitler's bombers and given the right tools, and then sent right in. The whole thing was a big con. It required, the power of the German army required the U.S. Germany was not industrial enough on its own. We had a much more large amount of land and much more industrial power to do this for them. But then the legitimate people in the military were actually fighting against the Germans and won that war. So it's a very complex story. 1952, as I said, the Germans...
So all this, if it comes out and if it's true, shows that these elite groups, the Illuminati, these Draco aliens, all these people that are powerful really want to control this planet and domain, and they're doing it through wars and chaos, media, other things. How much of this is true, I don't know. But even if part of it is true, it is really scary of what the elite people will do to gain and have power. There's no two ways about it that bloodshed and power are connected. Again, it's Roger Martin from Billings, Montana. Do your own research. This stuff is way out there, and who knows when it's going to be verified or cleared up. Maybe the second coming, I don't know. This stuff is really bizarre. Again, Roger Martin from Billings, Montana. Good day.